Shalom, everyone. Welcome to the Aryeh podcast. We're a podcast that we create deep and meaningful conversations with leaders from all around the world. Our second episode, we have Rabbi Avi Horowitz. Rabbi Avi Horowitz is one of the rabbis I admire the most. You will see from his story how much courage he has, how he takes risks. He doesn't ever say the word "I can't," and I don't want to give spoilers. So, with that short introduction, I want to start. Rabbi Horowitz, tell me your story. Your beginning, how do you end up in Chile, and how after all of that you end up doing Aliyah? I want to a summary of your story.
Okay. Well, first of all, Joseph, it's a pleasure to be here. And I do want to disagree. I am a person that does say I can't. I do say I can't a little bit too often. But there are certain things that do get me to move. And one of those things, I think due to my upbringing, outside of big communities, I grew up in small communities. I grew up in yeshivot that were a little bit outside of, let's say, the mainstream. I think that helped shape me a lot to feel a desire to help the Jewish people. And I don't know why exactly why I have that feeling that's so strong within me, but it somehow became developed through my years in yeshiva. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I went to yeshiva there for high school, and then I went to Ner Yisrael, which is Ner Yisrael is a yeshiva which encourages the boys to look outward and see how they could help the Jewish people. My Rebbe was Rabbi Weinberg, who was a visionary, who was the older brother of Noach Weinberg, who provided a lot of vision for Reb Noach, also at least helped Reb Noach consolidate a lot of his vision for Aish Torah into words and to teachings. And he was very, very close to his younger brother. He used to go when he could to Eretz Yisrael to deliver classes and be close to the Bachrim in their early fledgling years of Aish Torah. And he was my Rebbe, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. I named one of my children after him even after he died. He died suddenly 2 years after I had decided to leave the yeshiva after 7 years in Kollel to go to Chile. And the reason why I decided to go to Chile was because even in the United States, I was looking for a position as a rabbi in some off the beaten track place. And I found Chile to be an exciting adventure. At that time, it was not really a formed community. It didn't have a school, which to me was the most glaring piece that was missing in the community. You can't create a real Jewish community without a school. So even though I went down there with my wife, first to visit, and then to make a long story short, we decided to go in 1996. The thing I had in my mind was that we needed to do something that was going to make the community real, which was to make a school. So even though we started with creating Aish Torah there, there were people that had already started that were there and created opportunities for people to go to fellowship programs since 1992. So it was in the air. When I got there, I had visited in 1992, 94, 95, and then again in 96 before we decided to go down. And it was as I say in English, it was palpable, the hitlavut, the excitement, the enthusiasm for Judaism amongst young boys and girls that were in university, that were questioning things of what they had as far as their connection to Judaism goes. And when we went down there, we were just so taken by the excitement of the possibility of being able to try to help these young people to create a community and to try to teach them a little bit of what Judaism is about. We jumped for it. We went for it. And I have to thank my wife, who was really willing to go along with it. It was thanks to her, really, that we were able to make it down there all those years. We raised 3 children there. 3 children were already born. We were born and raised 3 children in Chile. And after 20 some years there, we finally left very, very happily. We wanted to give, I think part of being a part of a team and community building is to know when it's your time to leave and to let others from the next generation take over. So after 20 some years, we decided to leave. I must say, I always wanted to live in Eretz Yisrael, which is where I am now. But I miss being in a place where everything is, for many people, is new, and there's a certain hitchadshut, there's a certain desire to understand and to do things right in Yiddishkeit that you find in Bali Tshuva communities that you don't find in other places. So I went over the border of the question that you asked me, but that's a basic idea of where I'm at now.
Yeah, but I have one question because I think it didn't show. You chose Chile with not knowing the language, not knowing anything. First of all, why did you do that? And second of all, how did you manage to take that challenge upon? Like, where do you get that strength to say I don't know the language, but I'm gonna figure it out anyway?
Yeah, something when you do when people, I think when people do things like this, it's because they have it in them. It's not so much like I felt like I was being a hero at the time. There are certain more minor decisions that I've made in my life, which I would rather not talk about now, that I felt there was much more difficult of a decision to make. But going to a place like that, like I said, I think it's part of my conditioning and part of where I grew up. We were what we call Malcolm Gladwell is a person who wrote a book called Outliers. It's a very good book. I was like an outlier in that sense. I grew up in the periphery of the religious community. We grew up in a small place, and we looked at places like New York and big towns and Detroit and LA, and as if like as almost spectators. So we were able to see things from a different perspective. And to me, I wasn't married ever to like big giant Jewish community life. We always looked at it a little bit with suspicion that maybe things aren't so great in very big established communities. And to this day, I think that raising children, if you can, it's always better to raise children in a place where people know them and it's small and it's community oriented, and children can feel that they can participate and to contribute. And that's the way we were. We felt important as Jews in a very, very non-Jewish place. And I'm sure you yourself, to a certain extent, feel that way growing up where you grew up, Joseph. And others like you, end up taking leadership positions like you to help other people because that you count, and because you grew up that way. You just feel like an individual. I think a lot of that had to do with our decision to go. The idea of not knowing the language to me was an exciting thing. I like languages. If I could go somewhere to France because they really needed somebody, I would like to do that and learn French. And then, these new things, they're exciting to me. They're not. That's just the way I am. It's not. It's nothing heroic about it. It's just. I felt like I didn't need all the cushioning of a community and all of the accoutrements and the things that accompany big community life. I just never felt that I needed it. And this was a great opportunity. And we had the economic reality to be able to live down there without really having a super duper job. It was very minimal, whatever we were able to make. So I had a certain set of situations that allowed me to do it. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that would make similar decisions, but maybe they can't because of money or they can't because of other things. But luckily enough, we had the resources to be able to do that for many years without even having an official job. So that was that part I must say was not so simple. It's very hard to wake up every morning and to like reinvent your schedule. Like the first couple of years in Chile, like you just wake up in the morning, like, well, what am I going to do today? Or you plan some stuff in Aish and you plan some activities but if it wasn't for my learning, for me to be able to know that I would sit down and learn Torah, which is what I like doing when I'm not helping or doing other things, I don't think I would have been able to last so long.
Uh,
You have to have a core. You have to have an anchor where you feel you're growing still and you are thinking and your mind is moving. Otherwise, it would have been just like hit and miss all day, try to help this. I mean, it was a lot of frustration in the beginning if it was just that alone.
yeah.
But in
Oh,
general,
I think you're touching into deep, very important ideas because you say I don't feel like the hero, but I believe that in order to be a hero, you have to be happy with what you're doing. It has to be exciting to you. I don't see it as a contradictory that the hero has to take the most challenging thing that he doesn't enjoy. Like myself, when I started this whole Aryeh thing, I do it because it's just so exciting and it's so cool. It opens up my mind. It opens up my creativity. It's just fun to do it. Of course, as you said, there will be challenges. There will be times where you're gonna feel a little bit lost, and you. The other idea that you really gave that you touched, that you need an anchor, that you need somewhere to have like a safe space where you always feel supported, or you feel like a connection. Maybe you can find that through God, or you can find that through learning Torah, as you said, or by a community, family. Many people find different ways to find that support, but I think those are very important things that people should learn. That you need to be excited by the things that you do, and that you need a support system. That you need somewhere to anchor yourself, because if not, the uncertainty will just kill you in some way. So I
yeah.
think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, look. If we can mutually agree to call ourselves heroes or not, but we're both doing the same thing, and we're both doing it because our conditioning allows us to do it. I just feel that
Yeah.
in order to call somebody a real hero in my book is when a person has a choice to make, and to take the choice that's the, let's say, more correct but much more difficult choice is what the person ends up taking, and that's heroic. A person does something against the
Oh,
grain. I'm not talking about doing something against the grain because I happen to be a person that's in some settings I do things against the grain. There's not too many people that I know that have done things like I have, but there's also not that many people that I know that grew up with a set of circumstances that I grew up. That had the opportunity to do the things that I did. So it's a combination of having the opportunity and the ability to do it, and the time and the right mazal, the good luck to have it come, presented to you in the right time of your life. And my wife was willing to go along with it.
yeah.
So our children are very, very happy that they grew up in Chile.
Interesting.
They have great warm feelings towards, and so do we, towards the community and towards our experience there. And what can I say? I'm glad that we made that choice. You feel when you're on a mission. If you feel you're on a mission, it influences your children, and it gives a positive vibe. People look to you for help and for guidance, and you become like a way of showing how. Well, let me just backtrack for one thing. I know you're not asking me this question, but as long as we're on a podcast, I think it's whoever's listening to this, it's important to hear the following thing. I think that there's a lot of people out there that are trying to influence other people. Let's just talk about this sphere. Today there's a world called influencers, right? You can be an influencer on Instagram and stuff like that. But the original influencers, started from Avram Avinu. And Avram Avinu, like those of us all of us that try to follow his footsteps, to try to spread what, let's say, Torah or God. So I hesitatingly use the word Torah and God even in this sentence, because I think really what works, and what, especially today, what really influences on other people is not so much what you profess or your ideas. It's more the influence of it's more our ability to show other people that really we feel, or in our case, we felt that we have something very good, and we want to share it with you because we care for you. So I think that feeling of what we can call chesed of Avraham Avinu is really what ultimately influenced people to want to be like Avraham Avinu, to want to understand what Avraham Avinu saw in his life that was able to change so many people. And I think anybody that goes in the ways of Avraham Avinu will always be successful in that way, because you're not trying to push a particular agenda. You're not trying to convince people to be like you. I never felt that I think people should be like me, like religious people. I never felt like, oh, I'm only successful if I make a certain amount of people religious. That's not even on my map. The idea always was that, like, if we're a solid family and we're happy, there's a reason why we're that way, and we can appreciate that a lot of the ingredients that go into making a good, solid family with values and with very special values and things that make you aspire to greatness and want to understand the world and want to connect to other people and connect to God are all great things to be able to have in your life. And people go, from one side of the world to another to try to find these things. And if they can meet someone in their path of life where they can see someone who's just like saying, look, I have this delicious thing, I want to share some with you, because I care for you as another human being, as another Jew. I think people are always touched by that. And that's why it always centers around, Shabbat and family life and inviting people in your home. There's nothing like that. You can give 1,000 classes and on one side, and on the other side, you can have somebody over and bring them into a warm home where people are legitimately nice and interested in you and interested in hearing what you have to say and want to share with you their life. I mean, I don't think there's anything as powerful as that. And that's why Shabbat Project, for example, was one of the things I really pushed, because even though it came with a different packaging, but ultimately Shabbat itself is the greatest seller of Judaism. Because if you can bring Shabbat in a warm setting and show people, look, this is a beautiful thing, and why wouldn't you want to partake in it? It's impossible that doesn't create an effect on people. So again, I'm only saying this because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there about kiruv and how people could be, and what you, Joseph, are trying to do is ultimately, I think, also this thing. It's like it's like if you're watching a good show or if you have something delicious. When a person grows up a little bit and you have something delicious, you look around to see, like, who else can I share this with? Like, you feel almost like you're missing part of the enjoyment if you just eat it yourself, or if you're watching something funny on show. You look around to see, like, who else can you share this with, because it's something good. But naturally, when you see something good, you feel it. You want somebody else to share with it, and that's the feeling, I think, that really works.
Definitely agree. And going into, like, exactly what you're talking about is one of the things that it fires me a little bit, or gets me, like, gives me some angst, is that many times I found in the people I'm around that a lot of observant Jews, they put a lot of focus in the adherence to the rituals and the study and the whole point is as you just explained, the whole point of Shabbat is the feeling and the value behind it, is the values, and many times it's very forgotten that there's a purpose behind it, and we just do things because we want to keep the tradition, or I don't know. So things like values or ethics, leadership, and like all these things like social responsibility, relationships, oftentimes they see like, oh, this is part of the secular world. This is not part of Torah. Torah is all about Shabbat and the adherence to the law, and all these other things are secular things. And how do we change that perception that all these other things are within Torah in itself and are within the Jewish tradition itself? And not only are they separate, but they're within the ritualistic aspect of it. They're ingrained one with the other. It's not like one, or like, how do we change that perspective within the religious community and within the religious people?
Yeah. Well, Joseph, I don't want to pull rank here, being a little older than you, but I was once your age, and I used to ask those types of questions. And you should ask those questions, because it bothers you and it should bother you. But ultimately, it's not so much that direction that's really going to change anything. We can only change ourselves. We can't really count on changing anybody else. So the only thing we can do is create our own experiences where this is the way we influence other people. And ultimately, the truth wins out. I think we're living in a generation where perhaps because of a lack of, I don't know, let's say creativity, or because of a lack of willingness to change, people just repeat the same recipe and use the same sack of tea, as a Rabbi Biton, a friend of mine from who used to be a rabbi in Uruguay, used to say. It's like the tradition is like sometimes you feel the tradition is like a tea bag. It's like 3 generations ago it was like a fresh tea bag, that made a delicious aroma in a delicious fresh tea, and then the father, instead of buying his son a new tea bag, he gives him the same tea bag to make tea for, and then his son gives his kid the same tea bag. Eventually, it's a dried out tea bag. It doesn't have any flavor to it anymore. And what happens in our situation, it's without making any. I'm not a sociologist, but I like thinking like a sociologist. What I see in this respect is that there was once upon a time where the world in general, let's say over 100 years ago, living somewhere in Europe, there were the haves and the have-nots. And the have-nots were many more than the haves. I mean, people didn't have, on a general, let's say talking about the Jewish people's experience in Europe, most people were just making it, if there was a lot of poverty and problems and persecution and something, the general population also, it was just not a world of plenty as we know it today. So as a result, if you just came to the Shabbat table and you had rituals and you had halacha and you had something to stick to, even if it wasn't, there was no necessity to play it up, let's say, and to talk about the things that you're talking about of showing enjoyment, because by definition, it was better than whatever there was. You know what I'm saying? You could either be out there in the stall with the pigs and the cows, trying to schlep a meager income, to survive, or you can be in your nice warm house with the Shabbat, and the singing and with all the halachot, and however stern your father was, or it had to be like this. Everything is contextual, in the context, that was much better, and that was enough. And if that was good for the Jews, so then it's because of that context. But eventually the world became a much more developed world, and now the youth and even the adults realize that, if you're not enjoying the religion, so there are other things that are more enjoyable, and you could even say they're even more spiritual because they make you feel better and they make you feel more connected. So today, if we just keep repeating the same recipe of people like to be all legalistic and that's where they find their, they're very intellectual. I learned that lesson myself. I mean, I came from many, many years in yeshiva, and the things that inspired me were things that did not inspire many people. And as much as I tried to bring it down to a level of, of like more universal and stuff like that, and it helped me a lot to bring down the ideas of what we're doing, the practices that we're doing. But in the end, people want to attach themselves to something that's personally meaningful. And personally meaningful doesn't mean to most people anymore like some great idea that you can strive to. They want to feel good now, and they want to see something that's joyful, and that people are really vibrating with, as we say in Spanish. La hace vibrar. They're like they're really enthusiastic. They're really living life the way people would imagine they would want themselves to be living life, like happy, good relationships. A good, healthy spirit, a positive, attitude, not so connected to like all the silly things that are going on in the world, not so connected to like a lot of the vagaries and the superficiality. People that are looking for real connection and stuff like that, but also very, very happy and positive as they're doing it and practicing their things and breathing life in this tradition that's so old, but yet seemingly so meaningful because it's so old. Even just that, you can't find that in the world too much anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's something that's necessary today. So when you ask me, what can we do to help, people, all you can do is create more and more spaces where people understand. And there are many places like that. I don't want to keep going on and on, but there is an influence now of Hasidut. There's an influence now of Hasidut, which has kind of meshed with the more Torah world, typical Torah, Lithuanian world. And if there's one good thing that I would point to about the influence of Hasidut is the stress on happiness, the stress on being in the moment. Let's just say, I guess, in Torah halachic terms, more connecting now to what it is that you're doing, more communal connection type of stress. So there is that influence that's helping, and I think in the end, just like anything, eventually people gravitate to the things that are more meaningful, and I think that's what's happening.
So my point was more, I feel that the problem comes from perspective, that they think that many times people think that like leadership or taking care of myself is part of the secular world, and they feel like if I'm doing these things, I'm distracting myself from Torah, and I'm distracting myself from my real duty, which is the halacha. And my question is more on how do we shift from this perspective? Like, if I'm sitting down with someone that thinks like that, how can I show them, look, this is not, Judaism has all these things within it too, and it's not a fight between the secular world and the religious world. Rather, you find these ideas within your tradition too.
Yeah, well, you're touching on a couple of things that in my mind are going different directions, but I'll start with one. I think that when you say, people want to have, in today's world, I think people want to have everything, even in the religious world. In other words, because, like I said, we're in a world where especially the young, the youth feel that really the world is in front of them. They can have whatever they want. I mean, there's this illusion. There is this illusion, and that's why there's a lot of disillusion when it comes to actually doing stuff, because the millennials and post-millennials are feeling that they have so many choices in front of them. They can't decide on anything because it's there are many studies that show that too many choices actually freeze you after a certain point, after a certain inflection point. Having too much in front of you that you could actually do or think you can do actually makes you become less efficient. So I think in the spiritual world also, I think people have gotten used to this idea of like, yeah, if I want, I could do that too. So they shoot for the highest point, and they're exposed to many boys go to yeshivot, or they hear, or they whatever, and they feel like, it's in some way or another, it's like all or nothing. And they don't realize that the Torah was never made that way. The Torah was never designed for that. The Torah was designed for being, like we said, being in the moment. It's bechol d'rachecha da'ehu. It's like the Rambam says that you need to know God, which means to know meaning and to know, have understanding in whatever ways that you find yourself able and capable of doing. There are, when you talk about, spending time on yourself, which is very popular today, a lot of times, guys are into exercise and things like that. And maybe, sometimes people can feel like, oh, why am I spending so much time on myself? Now, the truth of the matter is that if you think about a very great person, right? We'll all agree that a very great person is really selfless, right? A great person is really selfless. And what does it mean, selfless? It means that they've already created for themselves, or they've already been given a gift of confidence in themselves for whatever reason that allows them to not have to worry about themselves so much, and they can be just focused outward all the time. You know, the Moshe Rabbeinus of the world, the Aaron HaKohens, the Avram Yitzhak Cooks, the Chazon Ish of the world, you know, all the great people that we know in our tradition that are basically people that didn't wake up in the morning and say, oh, maybe I should, you know, brush my teeth a few more times, or maybe I should, you know, get a better routine, exercise routine, or eat. All that stuff came easier to them in the sense that they were more into focusing on like higher objectives. But we have to all be honest and say, like, we aren't all that way. A lot of us were born with without that confidence and without that base functional, you know, a happy
You think
level.
it can be developed though?
Yes, I think it can be developed, of course, but some people it just takes longer. And still, when they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they're still trying to figure themselves out. And that's fine. That's fine. You know, but again, the catch-all in our tradition, and even gets to Shulchan Aruch, is a separate siman in Shulchan Aruch. I don't know who your readership or listenership is, but Shulchan Aruch is the code of Jewish law that says that that you can do many things in life, but provided you're not justifying something that's really awful, you're doing something that's within the realm of like not obligated to do it, and it's not a horrible thing to do. It's somewhere in the middle, which is most of the things that we do in our life, the gray. If you should do though, if we can sanctify those things, to do those things for a higher purpose, so then you've already made yourself into a holy person, which is the idea of Judaism. You know, so unfortunately, this is a little bit downplayed because I think people don't have enough live examples of this. They either think that you're holy because you're learning Torah all day, or they think you're unholy because you like playing basketball, or you know, or going to the movies, or reading books, or playing violin. You know, that's like, people don't have this complexity anymore. They think like we really should have everything. It's like people today, I'll give you an example. It's like people today who didn't really make it in business, right? They go into business and they're not millionaires. They can support a family. So what do people think? You're kind of a loser. You know, you're like almost a super duper loser, but you're like maybe not such a bad loser, but you're like a loser. Because really, if you would have worked harder, you know, and if you would have been, you know, you would have gotten to the top Forbes 500, you know, then you would have been a real success story in your life. And we have this elitist type of way of looking at things because we are in a world where you can have everything. So if you just make the right choices, you'll just get everything that you want. It's something that we have to struggle with all the time. It's what creates all kinds of other social issues, hedonistic type of tendencies, and very egotistical type of thinking. And people, you know, it pushes people in the wrong directions, pushes the wrong buttons. But like I said, we can live a meaningful life. Sorry.
So you think that the way we look at success is somewhat off? That success shouldn't be, or you being the most, it shouldn't be based on significance, of what makes me. Rather, it should be more on I don't know, what should be the value that people should be looking in their lives? That what should be the determination of success?
Well, I'll give you an example. The word success itself cannot be a word that is based on other people's opinions. Otherwise, what is it? I mean, your idea of success might not be the other guy's idea of success, which might not be the other ultimately success has to be personal. Like, we used to have this out in my school in Chile all the time. There's this concept in schools called academic excellence, in Spanish, excelencia académica. So people would come to the school knocking on doors, say, ¿Tienes excelencia académica? That would be like, or do you have academic excellence in your school? And like, I would look at them, if I would feel comfortable enough without scaring them off right away, I would say, look, you have a few minutes? Let me explain to you something. Could you explain to me what you mean when you say academic excellence? And as soon as a person would have to explain, which is so often the case when you talk about these cliche concepts that people just throw around, the people themselves start understanding that, like, do I really want my child at all costs to get like the best grades in math and science? Is that what I mean? Like, what does that mean? I mean, can anyone guarantee that my child is going to be ranked top 10 in the country in science and math and language? I mean, is that even possible? Can anyone do that? I mean, if you're going to do that, you're going to turn your school probably into a concentration camp or something similar, because you're going to have to make the same result from every child that walks into the school. So as soon as people stop to think about that, they realize that, well, the word excellence, what does academic excellence really mean? At best, it mean that you offer, at best it means that you could offer the best tools to achieve academic excellence. So in case a person has the ability to excel in math, so that they will excel in math, because you have good teachers and you have good stimulus and you have good educational tools and you have a good, a climate, and a lot of other things that need to go into a good school. So that I say to them, like, so ultimately to me, academic excellence means that we're interested in your child getting to the best place that he should get. And that's excellence. So to you, I say the same thing. Like, how's a person going to be matzliach, as they say in Hebrew, successful? Successful means, do you feel successful? Do you feel that what you plan to do, that you plan to do things, and hopefully those things are actually things that bring you, out of your comfort zone and make you grow a little bit, and you're able to execute those things successfully. If you're able to do that, so then you're a successful person, right? Do you want to get married? Yes. Okay. So have you been able to find someone to get married? Would anybody say, "Oh, you're a wildly successful guy because you got married," right? So nobody will say that, but it depends. Maybe for a person, he really needed to work on himself and to find himself and to know what he wanted in life and do a lot of other things in order to find somebody suitable to marry. And a lot of other things. I mean, all the other unsung heroes of my son just went on a hike that I tried to go for a few days on because I thought I was still young. And we tried to do the Shvil HaGolan, which is all the way from the north, all the way to the Kinneret. And it's like 75 miles. And we tried to do it in a couple of days. So I couldn't do it with a whole backpack on my back. After 2 days, I was out. But my son got to the end, and, in 3.5, 4 days, he really, really wanted to do it. So on the chat in the family, I sent, wanted to give him a big pat on the back for like this major thing. And as I'm writing this to him, I'm thinking about my daughter-in-law, right? Who's a hero in and of herself, and she's very successful in herself. She's a mother, right? She's very smart, but she chose to be a mother instead of going to university. If she wanted to go to university, she would be a straight A student. She's a brilliant girl. And she takes like online courses and nutrition and things like that. But the point is she's a hero every day. She has to deal with, she has to make a plan for her children. She has to execute them. She has to not execute them. Hopefully not. She has to execute the plan, right? She has to execute the plan. She has to get the kids happy home. She has to get them fed and bathed and put them in then and be patient all the time and work on her midot, on her personal characteristics so not to get angry. I mean, that's very hard. And that's every day. And that's being successful. So what are we talking about when we're being successful exactly? When we say, what's a life, a successful life, it's you have to see it that way. It's the process.
Uh, I think from the whole explanation, I could summarize it in a like one is that success has to be really connected to fulfillment. That it's mostly about how fulfilled you become as a personal, and it has to be personalized, and it has to be. I don't know if you watch Jordan Peterson. He always talks about like the thing between chaos and order, that one has to put ourselves in a situation where there's enough chaos that it doesn't bring you down, but that's different for every single human being. Some people can take more chaos than other in different areas. Also, like maybe I'm more intellectual, so I might be able to take very intellectual, complicated things. Whereas if we talk about like fitness, I might not be the most welcoming to become the next swimming. I will not be able to become Michael Phelps. So it's also about like knowing where do you fit. So I think that's what I get. Like success shouldn't be about what the world tells you or what the world tells you to be successful. Rather, it should be connected to what fulfills you, and
Exactly.
where do you fit in the world.
100%. I couldn't have said it better, and I appreciate what Jordan Peterson also said about that. It's very it's something that's very, very basic to human life, but it's unfortunately become lost in a generation which listens a lot more, and not only a lot more, but listens almost exclusively to what everybody is saying. You know, when you're on social media, you're constantly tuned into what everybody's saying.
Where do you think is that coming from?
Where is that coming from?
I think it in my view, yeah, it seems to me that it's coming from a place of validation. People are looking to be validated, and they want to like get people to be like, oh, pay attention to me, look at me, and like they're in the end they're looking for love. Like their deeper desire is more like love rather than and that's why they take all these ideas of I want to be successful because I want to be famous, or I want to be successful because I want to be it sounds to me that what they're trying to do is getting attention because they cannot get real love, or they cannot get that real feeling, so they're trying to replace it with a cheaper version of love. But that's my idea. I don't know what
Yeah, to a certain extent I think you're right. But I think even, people or children who are coming from somewhat of a stable and let's say loving context are also swept up into it. They're also swept up to it because it's exciting. It's out there. There's this feeling. I sometimes feel that it's a feeling of being able to. It's a feeling of being able to feel that you're doing something when you're actually doing nothing. It really, I mean, it's the whole, computer revolution is not just exciting for what it is you can extract from it to actually enhance and enrich your life, but it's also, you just feel, I think, in a false way that you're actually doing a lot more than you're actually doing.
So there's a lot of variety too, and it like people feel surprised and feel like things are changing.
Right.
So that's another thing that we want a lot as human beings, is to things not be stagnant.
Exactly. So that's part of it. That's part of the feeling that you're actually doing something because you got 150,000 likes, because you made some kind of ridiculous video of you like jumping out of your second floor window, So that, I mean, what have you done? I mean, it's a generation that really, if it buys into this thing, has become totally unanchored from reality. Because if a person would think for a second that they're actually a better person because they jumped out of their second floor window and they got 150,000 likes, there's something wrong with that thinking, because it didn't do anything for the world. Maybe you can say, if you really want to be gracious, you'll say, well, maybe, there was a person who was really down and they saw this and made them smile, okay, I don't know. But the point is realistically, there's just no connection. There's no connection anymore with like what's really valuable. And it has a lot to do with what you were saying originally. It's like people are looking to connect without doing the work. when you want to connect to somebody really, you have to be interested in what they have to say. You have to be interested in getting to know them. You have to be, and religion helps a lot in this way, because if you're religious, you realize that the other person is also a part of God. He's an image of God, and whatever's within you that you find to be amazing and exciting, there's also in another person. And I think starting from there is where you start creating like a much more of a healthy environment where people are really interested in each other. But after all said and done, in social media, nobody's interested in anybody, really. People are interested in themselves being entertained, but nobody really cares about anybody else because it's impossible. How could you possibly expect that? And I think one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen in this way is people trying to fool themselves into like being friends, virtual friends on these like gamers kind of thing. I think it was probably one of the most pathetic documentaries that I've seen of people like who are gamers, who play Fortnite together from a distance, and come to these conventions, and they feel like they have a real bond, and they interview them. They have like this super duper bond, and then some guys people get married. I mean, it's almost not to be believed. I mean, I think if I would try to explain this to my father, even forget about his father, I think they would think I was either insane or I was like an alien talking about a different reality. But there's no way to describe what we're going through, except really look at it in the face. I mean, we have to really, stick to our, like I want to just warn you, like you asked a question before that also got me thinking. A lot of times our reaction to these things is like, it's, this is really bad, and we need to change the world. Like, again, we have to work with what we have, right? And I think on the contrary, the silver lining is that it's a lot easier to show people and move people in the right direction if you show them something real, because they're just so starved, like you said, for love and for affection, real affection, and for real caring and for real connection, that if you're able to take out the time to show someone that you care about them, it really goes a long way. I see that in schools where I work, that kids are starved for just somebody to just stop. I think one of the biggest things is just the stopping. Like they're constantly watching adults moving and never ending, looking at their phones and seemingly connecting with everybody except for the person in front of them. And when you just stop and sit down and look at a child in the eyes, you've already accomplished like 60% of what they need, in today's day and age.
Well, so that is, it gives me so much to talk about, because like for one part, like how the technology and how technological revolution has changed us and has goods and bads in everything. I think that one of the ideas that I really like to think is, many people believe that if everything was perfect, everything would be great. But the more I realize, if everything would be perfect, if we did it, the more perfect we become a society, the more we're starving to because I think part of the human nature is to have something to look forward to. Like, I'm working hard towards something. So now you don't have to worry about the cold. You don't have to worry about sleeping well, and this is almost everybody. Like, it's not that only the rich ones anymore. It's like almost everybody has a place to sleep. Everybody has a place to eat, has like, or maybe not everybody, because the world, but we're going to a place where everybody will get there. We're going to a place where everybody will get all the comforts of life. So maybe our education needs to put a little bit of discomfort in the children or we need that discomfort, because that discomfort is in some way what makes us grow. I think that's what you're trying to allude to, is when everything is given, because if you don't do the real work, you end up with fake versions of what we're truly looking for.
Yeah, it's amazing that you're very perceptive on your behalf, Joseph. I compliment you on that. It's something I actually spoke about this past Shabbat in the synagogue, because I give a little speech on Shabbat about education that has to do with what we're reading in the Torah. And I was trying to point out that we can educate children also to desire in the right way. In other words, a lot of times the word desire, especially in the more Catholic, general Occidental world, is something that has connotation of negative or evil, desire.
Yeah.
But the truth is, that is man. Man desires and chooses based on his desire. And if you look at, let's say, imagine two children, and you see one child who's very desirous and another child who looks like, the student that never makes a problem and sits there and, does exactly what he's told. Very often we just feel like, oh, well, the second child is, destined for greatness, and the first child is going to end up in jail. And the truth of the matter is that it's neither this or that. I don't want to make it a simple equation, but what's wrong with this picture and the way we see it is that the child that's expressing desire, instead of squashing him, needs to be able to learn how to cultivate his desire, not to squash it.
Yeah.
And the child who has very little desire needs to be, we need to ask ourselves, why is this child so unopinionated? Why is this child not expressing themselves more, right, in what they want? And usually the answer is because whatever they want has been told is not good in one way or another. So if a child says, Dad, I really want a bike. Could you give me a bike? And, and the father just wants to get so they'll have the father or the mother will come with all kinds of already preconceived notions about, yes, the bike, no, the bike, does he deserve it? Doesn't he deserve it? They're thinking about the bike, but they're missing the fact that a child at a young age, the fact that he wants something is good, essentially good, right? What the child needs to do, really, what we need to do actually as educators is say, okay, you want a bike? Great. I'm glad that you're passionate about, getting a bike and biking. It could be great and everything. The thing is, let's see how we can become like partners in getting that bike, right? In other words, we need to distance what the desire is from the desire, so that the child can actually discover the desire along the way. That desire is not like an instantaneous, infatuation for something. That's not really desire. That's infatuation. A desire is that you strive for something, and the more you strive for it, the more you appreciate what it is that you want. And when you actually get the thing, you actually appreciate it more, because you had to put in time and effort to cultivate your desire to actually get to this place. You have to keep it going. You have to really say, is it worth it that I want this thing? And that sharpens a person's desire in a sense that it makes it more towards, I would say, the spiritual, right? As opposed to just like, I want to eat, and as soon as you want to eat, you have instant food in front of you, right? It's like you start making a cost benefit analysis. You say, well, if I want hamburgers every day, well, I have to buy them. They're more expensive. I have to cook them. I have to. So eventually you start molding your desire to be something a little bit more fine. And if you're a good educator or a good parent, so you get the child to think about all kinds of other values along the way. Okay, you want a bike? Well, I think in order to have a bike, you need to learn safety, right? And in order to have a bike, let's think about some good things you can do with a bike. That's, there's good things that you can do for yourself, like exercise, but there's also good things you can do for other people, like maybe do errands, maybe, and all of a sudden the child starts thinking and desiring things that are automatically included in a more of a holy, more of a pure process. So you're associating the desire with and the satisfaction at the end with something pure. And that's like, I think, the essence of chinuch, of education, of real Jewish education anyway, is to keep distancing the desire from the objective, so that, like you're saying, the desire actually becomes real desire, because love and desire in the Torah is basically the desire to have something that you know you really can't have in the end, right? You can't have it really in its essence, because the minute you have it, then you don't love it anymore, right? But if you want to love, it's a process of wanting and growing towards it and taking steps towards it, and every couple steps feeling like you are more and more enveloped by the love of the thing that you desire, and you keep growing and growing in this direction, and you can and if it's a real love for something that's real, you'll never ever have it, but you'll never sell this process for anything else. So I don't want to get too deep into this thing, but we already did because of your comment. But this is a very, very deep idea of what it is to desire, and I think that and also, again, in today's generation, it's something that's, as educators, we see is very, very sorely missed. We call it an apathetic generation. There's a lot of apathy because there's this image that you can have everything, right? You can have everything. So whereas at one point in time we lived in a time of shortage, in a time of where it wasn't a given that just because you existed you were going to have everything. Like there was going to be hunger and persecution, and there was going to be limits, and everything was about limits. And so if you really developed a desire for something, you really had it much more entrenched in you what the reality was and what you were desiring. But when there's this impression of like you could have everything and everything's available, and people have to imagine and dream about other things that they might want, even though they really have whatever they need, there's this all of a sudden, like we said, too many choices, no desire. Too much, then there's no, I don't even know what I want anymore. I can't tell you
that this is also connected to the lack of leadership that we have, because like I've often like thought about myself, like in this generation we don't have a Lubavitcher Rebbe, we don't have Ovadia Yosef, we don't have Rabbi Kook, we don't have Rabbi Noach Weinberg, like. And many times I feel like there's no leader I can like latch onto him, like, and I can say like he's gonna make a brighter future. It seems like, do you feel that idea that you're connecting to is somewhat connected to this idea that there is not leaders that are, or maybe I'm wrong, maybe there are those leaders, but I haven't found them yet.
Yeah, well, it's a tough question, but in relation to what we were talking about before, I think one of the key aspects of leadership is to keep people dreaming, to keep people dreaming about the cause. And to me, that's crucial. I think that's what's missing today. I don't think I don't feel that we have inspirational leaders, especially with today's, way to get out there and transmit publicly and massively. I don't think it's fair for me to make a pronouncement that we don't have them, or for us to say that. I just feel that I would like to see it more. I would like to see more leaders inspiring people to.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there isn't, but I would say that compared to what we have before, like if I see the leaders of the last generation, I don't see the same movement and the same.
Okay, but I don't think I like Solomon. King Shlomo said it's not a wise thing to compare generations and say, well, this is better, this is worse. I mean, we don't know. The contexts are different. One of the reasons why the contexts were a little bit easier for, let's say, some of Rav Kook or the Chazon Ish or other people that inspired thousands and thousands of people is because the context is different, and people were looking to latch on to ideas and to dreams and visions. Today, in order to get somebody into a vision, it has to be really like la piedra en su zapato, as we say in Spanish. Like it has to be like a rock in the shoe. Like something has to be bothering you, right? To be looking for something. The question is, how to get into people's minds to really, long for something. It's a difficult thing. I see in education, it's very difficult, but we have to do it. We have to do it because otherwise I fear, like I don't know what to tell you, but during this Corona, I just kept feeling to myself that as human beings, as a society, a general society, we go in this vicious circle of, from scarcity to prosperity. And once there's prosperity, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot because we don't focus. The societies begin crumbling because they start focusing on having more and more and more without any purpose and without any meaning, and they become self-destructive. And when they become self-destructive, they create a tremendous amount of problems and war and then more and scarcity eventually, and then everybody has to go down and suffer, and then it goes back up. There's these constant cycles in the history of mankind that basically show this type of thing, and it's very difficult for me to imagine how we're going to break out of this. And I say to myself, the only way we can do that is, one of the things is that we have leaders that can say, you know what, look, we don't have to struggle so much about the basics of life. Like we can put food on the table. We have, our education, we have our way of life. Nobody's hopefully being violent or killing us or trying to do anything. So now this is what the Yemot HaMashiach is about, right? The reason why, the times of Messiah or the Mashiach makes it so special is because his leadership is going to make us focus on something that's beyond just surviving and, living life. It's creating a cause. It's creating a cause that people are willing to follow and to dedicate their lives for, to desire it. They'll desire a greater thing. And I always say, like, what is the cause? What is the cause today that people are willing to sacrifice for, to create in their lives this desire, this general desire of wanting something that they don't have? What is that thing? In my small context, I guess, in our religious context, when I was growing up, it was like, we need to learn Torah. That's the thing, because Torah, because the war, and because the thing, and we have to rebuild, and we have to think, and that was the cause, and that inspired generations of young students and eventually young adults and older adults, and it created the society we live in today, in the religious world I'm talking about, which of course, also influences the outer rings of the Jewish people. But today you ask yourself, what is it? If you try to tell students today, no, you need to learn Torah, they kind of look at you like, yeah, whatever. Like, been there, done that. Like, it's not, like, look at all these institutions. Everybody I know and his friend, they're all going to yeshiva. And if they're not, it's because they got turned off. I'm saying? It's not about learning Torah anymore. It just doesn't sell. I'm not saying, I'm not playing with the absolute worth of learning Torah, but I'm saying, if you're going to emphasize something of Judaism, I don't think that's the thing anymore that's going to turn the generation around. Personally, I used to think it was Israel. I think it was the land of Israel and trying to establish a society in Israel as a Jewish state in the way we should. But
I want to disagree with you, because I do still believe it's still Torah, but it's a different type of Torah. I think that the Torah that we have today many times is very in some way authoritarian. Let me explain, because you cannot have an opinion. Many times you have to latch to the opinions of the Gedolei, like people say it. And if you try to be a little creative and have your own way of thinking and looking at the thing, it's like you get bashed and like almost silenced because of thinking differently. So I think that is where the revolution will start, when we see that there's 70 phases to Torah. There's not one way forward. And people can realize that there is so much deep wisdom, and like when people really open and realize, but that's, I don't want to make it longer because we're already like overtime. So I think it's a great place to stop it. But I love to have you. It was like such a great discussion. I really went very deep into very cool topics, and it was a pleasure, Rabbi.
Okay. Wish you all the best.
If you want to respond to what I said, you can also.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It was a pleasure being here. Chag Sameach to you and to everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, bye-bye.